On my left, we're going to look at the corn here. We can see the check. Very, very heavy common ragweed. Also, we have yellow foxtail, some pigweed and lamb's quarter in there. But as we go down through, we're going to see that the real predominant weed that's having the effect on the corn is going to be that ragweed. If we look to my right, we start out with a Keystone, follow with a Realm Q, Durango, or a glyphosate product. Very excellent weed control. Really don't see any weeds in there. Nice height on the corn. I'm just going to mention here that the same plots are at the Beersford site or the Southeast Farm, and you can look at these plots there too, along with here where water hemp and velvet leaf main weeds there. Sure start here, started out with atrazine. We can see that the ragweed kind of overwhelmed it. The corn is hurt somewhat here, but when we come back with the Resicore and the Durango, it did get most of the ragweed. On my right, Bicep Magnum did a real good job on that ragweed early, followed by Halix and Atrazine. Very clean treatment. On my left, we've got an Acuron followed by Callisto Roundup post-emergence. We can see here that the corn is a little bit affected by height, especially in the front part of the plot. That's where the very heavy ragweed is at. And even though the Callisto took it out good later, the early season did have an effect on the corn. Same is for the Acuron and Roundup post-emergence. We were able to clean it up fairly well, but that early season has stunted that corn. Verdict and Atrazine here with Armazon Pro and Atrazine over the top. We can see wasn't enough Atrazine, even though we are sitting there with a full quart to take care of all the ragweed that we do have in this plot. That early season ragweed pressure did have some effect there. On my right, the Verdict Atrazine followed by Status or the dicamba product with Power Max and Atrazine. Again, that early season really had an effect. We were able to knock the ragweed down, but it already had some effect on that corn. Corvus Atrazine and Harnix Max, or the Atrax products there, did real good job. Took care of those weeds. A little early season pressure with the Corvus, but got most all of it. If we go with the balance over on my right, same product with the Harness Xtra, followed by the Caprino, Atrazine, and Roundup. Really did a good job, great height on the corn. Balance Flex with Harness Xtra did an excellent job of taking out that very early season weed pressure. We can see we used some Diflex and some Roundup over the top, but in reality it probably wouldn't even been needed in this treatment. Very clean, very good. Resicore here with Atrazine, also another one. Very good weed control early. We followed it up with the generic Roundup, Durango, and Incinerate over the top, cleared it off to finish out that treatment. On my left, Harness, very economical starter treatment. We can see did a fairly good job here, but we do have a few ragweeds that did escape that, and the Roundup Atrazine wasn't quite enough to clean that up the way we'd like. Again, on my right, we've got the Harness followed by the Harness Max, Roundup, and the NPAC. Again, the Harness Max is good for the residual, but we didn't get all of the ragweed killed, and so consequently we have a little bit coming through. Harness here, again, starting out with followed by Sinate and Atrazine, did a real good job of cleaning up those ragweed that did come through on the Harness. On my right, we can see the Dual Magnum was weaker on the ragweed to start with, even though the Shield X and the Roundup come back and cleaned it up. We do have stunting because of that early season weed pressure. On my left, now we're into the early post-emergence treatments. The one thing I want to point out here is with corn, if you have heavy weed pressure, you only have 2 weeks before your yield can be affected from weed pressure. So consequently, 2 weeks after the corn is out of the ground, we need to be controlling those weeds. Here where we can see even the early presence, this was 3 to 4 weeks after when it was planted. We can see stunting on that corn. Did a very good job of cleaning up and taking care of it, but we do have that stunting. Same way with the Armazon Pro, Atrazine, Roundup, and AMS. And you can say, well, why didn't we get these treatments on time? We failed. Yes, we did. We had a week of wind. I want to finish out today with just a couple of treatments of looking at Roundup in these hard times and rough economic for our farmers. I had quite a few questions this year. Well, can't I just go back and just use Roundup for this year? How's it going to do? Well, here we've got an early Roundup. We can see it got most of the weeds, but we got another flush that come later. Really would have needed to follow that up with a second Roundup and then hope we didn't have any resistant weeds, which we don't at the farm here. If we look at our right, where we waited a little while before that was applied, we can see we didn't do as good a job on weed control, and we definitely set that corn back significantly. I think with that, as we looked at the corn, very different from what we seen at the Southeast farm, and would be very good for you to take the time to look at both of those, because a lot of our program treatments may work good in one area but may not work as good in another area because of the difference in weed pressure. We need to know what weeds we have out there before we plan the program for the year.